Welcome aboard, everybody, to the Blue Heart Podcast with your host, Lieutenant Joe Pangaro. So today, what are we going to talk about? Well, I recently did a course on juvenile investigation, investigating crimes that involve juveniles either as victims, accused, suspects, witnesses, all that. And one of the things that come up, we talk about interviewing here a lot, because interviewing, like I've said many, many times, the ability to speak with somebody, to talk with people, is the key to getting information, which is the key to success in law enforcement, getting information, right? So the differences between interviewing an adult and interviewing a juvenile has to be understood. We have to understand what the difference is. We use a lot of the same techniques, but we also use different things because the way a juvenile thinks and perceives the world is different than an adult. So we're going to talk about this really quickly, and then I'm going to go through some points for you on interviewing juveniles for you to keep in mind at all times. All right, so first of all, the whole idea of what makes somebody speak to you, whether it's an adult or a juvenile, are really kind of the same. So we'll go over a couple of basic terms, and you've heard me say this before in other programs. If not, go back and listen to the programs and watch the videos when I'm talking about interviewing, because it's all very, very important for what you do. So the reality is, the concept of jeopardy. Somebody has got to have something to lose. They can get arrested. They can pay fines. They can lose their job. They can have all kinds of problems. They can go to jail, right? Those are things that people have jeopardy. And jeopardy is what makes people think, act, answer questions, and their body language makes it different. So we got to understand what the jeopardy is. Now, for an adult, if you think of an adult, a regular man or woman who's going about their life and they commit some kind of crime, embezzlement, let's say that they're stealing from their boss, either cash or doing some other stuff, and they get found out. Their jeopardy is, number one, they can be arrested for that. Number two, they may have spent the money and have to pay it back and they don't have it. They could be going to jail. They could lose their job. Their family can suffer financially. It could be all kinds of problems. That's big jeopardy that they have. And adults normally will confess and give you information and make admissions and whatnot when they realize that they're in big trouble and you've created a bond with them to the point where they feel that if they tell you the truth and give you the information you're looking for, it's better than if they just keep lying because maybe you have proof and then they're going to go to jail for 20 years as opposed to maybe getting probation or something. So people's jeopardy is what makes them act in their self-interest for adults. That's why they will often roll over on other people. They will give up other people involved in the crime because they're trying to save themselves. The difference is that with juveniles, right, while they have a sense of self-preservation, they want to do what's right, juveniles, people under 18, are often very, very much attached to their friends, and they are more concerned about their friends than they are about themselves. They don't really understand the concept of going to jail. They might be, going to jail, going to juvenile detention. They may know about that, but they don't really understand the implications of that. So if somebody is 14 and they shoot somebody, they might not get that they're going to go to jail at least till they're 21 and maybe longer than that, depending on what they did. They don't have a concept of the jeopardy that they're in, and instead they're more concerned with their friends, protecting their friends. So the techniques you would use with an adult, you don't necessarily use with a juvenile. You would try other things, right? And it's important for you to understand. Also, the perceptions that juveniles have about law enforcement, about right and wrong, can be different than adults. They can be, let me ask you this question. The police in your family, juveniles probably think police are good guys and girls, right? Because you're in law enforcement, they know you, you're a good person, right? In your community, you might think that. Not every community and family is the same. People that are involved in crime and get locked up regularly, their children may not see law enforcement and police officers as good guys and good girls. They might be the problem. If you arrested someone and they resisted and they ended up in a physical confrontation with police, the kids might be very upset that dad was beaten up by the police, right? They don't get any concept that dad was a criminal and he was resisting arrest. They just see the police as bad, right? So we got to understand that. So that's what we're going to go through. Now, I know we don't really like these, running the PowerPoint up here, but I'm going to do it anyway because it keeps me on track and gets me right to what I want to do here. And this is not a long program today, but there are some important things that come out every time I teach this course. Every time I teach this course where people ask questions and they say, hey, what about this? And I want to make sure you understand all of this. All right, so some important things to keep in mind when interviewing a juvenile, understanding the differences between adults and with kids. All right, each county prosecutor across the United States is going to have different requirements for specific interviews of juveniles. Go to your prosecutor, your district attorney, and find out, is there an age line where you might want to have to take the child to a specifically trained investigator for the interview? So here in New Jersey, where I am, every county has a requirement that juveniles age 12 and under have to be interviewed by a specifically trained officer who's trained to deal with juveniles. The reason being is that children, another difference in children, is that they have a tendency to look at adults and want to please the adults. They want to give you the answers you want. They want to make you happy. And sometimes that can be skewed by leading questions that you might ask, right? That's why when you go to the forensics interview by specifically trained juvenile investigators, they will use anatomically correct dolls for children who have been sexually assaulted. They will be able to speak to them in different ways than you would speak to an older teenager who has a different understanding of the world. So make sure you understand the age breakdown, if there is any, in your community of when you should be talking to the juvenile and when somebody specifically trained should be talking to the juvenile. So that's one of the first things. It's usually 12 and under because there's different time frames there. All right, so we want to make sure that children that are under 18 years old, they're not adults and they don't respond the same way. All right, so they don't think about things the same way. So that's why I covered that in the beginning. Terminology is very important in law enforcement. Words mean things. How we say things, what we say, the terms that we use are very, very important. So you want to make sure you understand in your community what is the generalized terms for the different ages of young people, of juveniles. In general, an infant is a baby, a little bitty baby. So when you say infant, you mean a little baby, less than 1 year old. When you say toddler, you're talking about 1 to 2 years old. When you're talking about preschoolers, you're talking about 3 to 5 years old. Middle children can be 6 to 8 years old, sometimes 9 to 11, right? So that 6 to 11 could be middle school child, middle-aged child. Young teens are 12 to 14. And teenagers 15 to 17. So make sure you understand the breakdown in your community so that you say the right things on the stand, you write the correct things in your reports, right? You don't want to be calling a 3-year-old an infant. Well, they're a baby, they're an infant. No, they're not. Infant is under 1 year old, right? See what I'm saying? So you want to use the right terminology. All right. Once you're ready to interview the child, one of the first things you have to do is is to get the child to open up to you and be comfortable with you and the process, right? So how are you going to go about that? We do that with adults by setting a baseline, right? We sit and we talk about anything except the crime that we're investigating. Talk about sports, their family, the hobby, weather, whatever, so that they relax and calm down. And then they can start talking and you can see how they respond when they have no jeopardy, right? So with kids, it's the same kind of thing. We want to change the process, right? You're the police. They might not like the police in their family, right? They may be scared. They don't know who the police are. They've never spoken to a police. The uniform can be scary, right? So you want to make sure you make the child comfortable before you speak to them and get the process going. So you want to be sure that you didn't cause the child to answer your questions in a way the child thinks you want them to answer. Right? So one of those examples you might say is, hey, mom reported that Uncle Bob did something to you yesterday. Was it Uncle Bob that's the one who touched you? Right? Now, it might have been Uncle Bob's friend who was with him. And when Uncle Bob went to the bathroom, the friend touched the kid. But the kid, the police are saying Uncle Bob, and Uncle Bob was there. So you might get the wrong answer. So the key to all of this is to use open-ended questions with children. Right? You want to say, hey, mom said something happened yesterday to you after school. Can you tell me what happened? Right? So now you've kind of given the child a time frame. After school, something happened, and now the child can tell you. You didn't mention anybody's name. You didn't say what happened. What happened to you? Now the child will tell you, and that's an unscripted answer. It's an unprovoked answer that you're looking for the honest truth, right, from the kid. Keep in mind that the way children answer questions is not the same as the way adults answer questions. So if I was robbed at 3 PM in my house with a home invasion and beaten up and had a gun in my face, and you said to me, something happened to you yesterday afternoon, I'd know exactly what you're talking about, and I would go right to the home invasion thing. Children are not necessarily the same. You might say, Mom said something happened to you yesterday afternoon when you got home from school. What happened? Well, you might hear about, I looked out the window and I saw ducks in my pool, and then I took my dog for a walk, and then this and that, and then, Uncle Bob came over with his friend, and that wasn't fun. See, so they might give you all kinds. Don't cut them off. Let them talk. Let the children talk. Let them tell you. And when you get, were the ducks? Have they been here a long time? Oh yeah, the ducks are nice. They come every year. And what was Uncle Bob came yesterday? What happened when Uncle Bob came? See, open-ended question, but you get to Uncle Bob. Expect different kind of answers because different priorities come from children. They might not focus in on that event initially, right? So you have to help them. Any information that you obtain will be questioned later by the courts and attorneys. And they're going to suggest that because of your interview technique and how you did it, you were coercive, suggestive, manipulative, or intimidating to the child, right? So you don't want to be those things. You have to deal with children differently than you do with adults. All right? The setting of your interview. Where are you going to do the interview? Now, we know that for adults, you might interview people at a suspicious person stop. You might interview them in a car stop, and you don't have any reason to bring them in, so that's where you're going to do the interview. We also have custodial interviews, right? We know that's the best. Custodial interview, where you bring the suspect into your building, where you control the building, you control the room, you control the layout, all that kind of stuff, is the best thing to do, because then there's the way you set up your room is important. That's all good for adults. For kids, it might not be, because it could be very intimidating, scary to them to be in a police station in an interview room, right? So what you might want to consider is, where are we going to talk to the children? So FBI specialist Martha Finnegan recommends using a child advocacy center for your interviews of children. But short of that, talking to them in their home is probably the most comfortable setting for the child. It's their house. Their stuff is all around. They're familiar with it. So it's going to be less intimidating for them than going to the police station, which who knows what connotations they have of the police station. But the problem with doing it at home is, if mom, dad, brother or sister, aunt or uncle, whoever there is the suspect, and they're lingering around the area, it might be very hard for the child to speak openly. So that's why understanding your case, what happened, who's involved, extremely important, because if Uncle Bob is the suspect and he lives in the house and he's in the kitchen and he keeps looking in, that's going to be tough for the kid, right? So you might want to either ask Uncle Bob to leave, or you might want to take the child to another place, an advocacy center for children or your police station. If not, you want to consider, whatever it is, there should be no distractions. Dogs barking, other kids talking, TV shows running, mom and dad walking in and out. You want to have as much calm as you possibly can, and no distractions. That's really the key. Unnecessary distractions, get rid of them. So what do you tell the child? Who you are and what you're about, right? You tell the child who you are. Why are you talking to them? Tell them the purpose, right? Give them that thing. Hi, I'm Officer Joe, and I'm here because mom said something happened yesterday, or dad said you saw something happen to the neighbor's house, and I'm here to ask you about it and find out. What did you see? What did you hear? What happened, right? So you tell them what you're about. Very, very important here to tell the child that it's okay to tell you that they don't know something, right? Because this is where the child wants to please you, and you're asking about, what did you see out the window when those 3 guys broke into the house? And maybe they didn't see them bash in the door. They just heard the screaming and saw people run out the door. Now, how did they get in the house? Did you see them get in the house? Yeah, they went through a window, right? And that's not true, but the child wants to please you and give you an answer. So by telling them, hey, it's okay. If you don't know something, tell me I don't know, right? Very, very important for you. You don't want them making up stuff. Another very important thing is you want to be clear with that child that if you say something that's incorrect, or is not right, or it doesn't make sense or whatever. The child is okay to correct you, because children don't always think it's okay to correct adults. So they might just listen and, boy, you got that all wrong, but they're not going to say anything. So you tell them, listen, and while we're talking, if I say anything that's not right, that didn't happen a certain way, or is not true, you can tell me, gee, that's not what I saw. That's not what I don't know, right? You want to be clear on those things with juveniles. Words mean things, right? This is a recurring theme in interview work. Words do mean things. What people say, how they say it, when they say it, the inflection on their voice, their body language, all very important. So you want to be clear on the meanings of words. Now, when I say this in the class, a lot of people laugh, but the reality is, think about your childhood. All right. Many, many families all across the world have special names for body parts other than the actual names for the body parts. So when you're dealing with a child who's been sexually abused, right, and you're talking about penis and vagina and this and that, they might not know it by their body parts by those names. They might not know. They might know it by another name, a wee wee, a chooky, or whatever. They might have other names. So you want to clarify those things with the kids, and maybe with the parents or the guardian. Are there special names or different names you use for body parts, whatever. But that goes for anything, right? What are you talking about? Make sure you understand the language the child is using and their understanding of what the words are and what they mean. We want to go a long way here. We want to skip any misconceptions that we can have. All right, so forensics interviews, we talked about that. Make sure if you have to use a forensics investigator, you do so. Time is another factor to clarify. Adults, if I was to say to you, what time did you have somebody bust through your back door in a home invasion and put a gun in your face? And you'll think about it and you'll tell me it was 2:55 p.m. yesterday, right? You'd be very clear on the date and time. What if it happened 5 days ago? You'd be able to think about it. You'd be able to say it was Sunday the 14th at 3:15 p.m. You'd be very clear because you're an adult. Your understanding of time is different than a child, right? They have wake up time, school time, lunchtime, TV time, bedtime. They don't necessarily have numbers attached to those things always. So you want to make sure you clarify time. So when they provide something, you want to is this something that just happened, or this is something that happened a couple days ago? So you want to break that down for them. Were you in school when this happened? Was this yesterday? Was this today? Was this a couple days ago? And how do you then go from there? So you might say, Mom said something happened to you yesterday after you got home from school. And could you tell me what happened? Oh, well, I was doing this and that and the other thing. I was watching SpongeBob, and then Uncle Bob came in with one of his friends, and that's when the bad thing happened. So you might say, oh, SpongeBob, I like SpongeBob. He's funny. What was the show about that day? And, oh, that was the time Patrick wanted to be a rock star, and he did. Oh, okay. Now you, the investigator, can go back and look at the episodes that played. Well, you find out it wasn't on Tuesday. On Monday, the episode of SpongeBob was on where Patrick wanted to be a rock star, and it comes on at 3:00. And he only saw half the show. She only saw half the show before Uncle Bob showed up. Now he knows about 3:15. So you can use things like that to try and pin down the time. Now, of course, you want to go over that with them and make sure that was the show they were watching or whatever. But you got to remember, time is not the same for adults as it is for children. So you want to be clear to get the best time you can. So when I say, what does the child think of you? Not every house, not every home, not every family, not every community feel the same about law enforcement. We know we see in our world, there's a whole world of difference in what different people think about law enforcement. This child might be in a family where they don't like law enforcement. They don't trust law enforcement. And therefore you want to make sure you talk about that. So you might say, listen, I'm a policeman and I'm here to talk to you about something that happened in the neighborhood or whatever. Do you like the police? And you might see some body language where the kid doesn't want to say no because you're the police, but you'll see the body language. You say, listen, it's okay. I understand not everybody likes the police. Do you like the police? Well, I do, but the police beat up my father. They beat up your father. They beat up my daddy really bad, and he didn't do nothing. Oh, okay. Well, I'm not that police officer that did that, and I'm sorry that happened to your dad. But not every police officer like that, and I'm sorry, but I'm not like that. I would never beat up your dad. I'm just here to talk to you, right? So you want to set the child at ease, understand, and separate yourself from any negativity they feel about law enforcement officers in general, right? So that's important. Other children and peer pressure. In almost every incident, now we're talking not just little kids up to 17 years old now, right? In violence and peer pressure, every time there's an incident of school violence, especially serious things like active shooter or somebody stabbing or whatever, we go back and we investigate, right? And we find out that some, if not lots of kids knew that the perpetrator was having problems, was saying things, doing things, whatever, was dangerous, but they don't come forward. And there's really two reasons that they give us that. Number one, they don't want to be wrong and they don't want to be a rat. So Billy Jones has a kill list of kids he wants to kill, and somebody sees it and they don't come forward. And later on you find out, oh, I knew he had this kill. Why didn't you tell us? Well, I didn't want to be a rat. I didn't want to say, because what happens? Little Joey sees this kill list and I go forward and tell the teacher. Now the teacher brings me down to the office. Then the principal goes and gets the kid who wrote the list. Hey, Joey says you have a kill. Now you involve Joey. Joey don't want to be involved in that. I don't want nobody saying that I did anything, right? And the other one is they don't believe that any adults are around that they can trust. And you say, what do you mean they can't trust you? Well, the reality is what it means by the trust is they don't trust you not to overreact, to drag them down, drag them in, get them involved in it, right? So you want to make sure that you cover that. You don't go running around exposing children to scrutiny that they don't want. They told you something, now go investigate it, right? So very important. Right? Additional information you might get. Right? You might get additional information. You interview the child tells you A, B, C, and D, and it's all good. And then a week later, you get a phone call from mom or dad. Hey, listen, little Tina has something more she just remembered. You might be suspicious of that. Why? Okay, so there's a couple things that could have happened. Legitimately, the child may have seen something that sparked a memory, remembered something that they honestly forgot to tell you, and then, they want to tell you. So they tell mom or dad or their guardian or whatever, and they call you. That's legitimate. Kids do forget. They do leave out details. And sometimes you'll get them to say they have more information. Or they could be being pressured by a parent, a guardian, an adult, or someone else to change their story. Very common. So if you're reporting something dad did and the kid told you about it, they feel disloyal to dad. Maybe dad's going to get arrested for it. And now mom's saying dad's going to go to jail. Why did you have to say that? As horrible as that stuff is, it happens all the time in juvenile investigations. So if a child has new information, you want to talk about that. Well, why didn't you tell me this last time? How did you remember it now? Did anybody tell you to say this? Right? You want to vet this information out in a nice, comfortable, calm way to find out. But it's not unusual, is my point, for children to come up with new information down the road that they forgot to tell you. All right, so keep that in mind. There's a growing trend in interviewing juveniles where it's just a total narrative. You start out with that question. Listen, mom said something happened to you when you came home from school yesterday. Can you tell me everything you can remember? And you just let the child talk, right? And you're taking notes as the child's going through. You have notes about what the child says, and then you have notes about the crime that took place. And when the child's all done, you might go back then and clarify, right? So an open-ended question here might be, what did you do yesterday? What happened when dad came home today? What did mom do when you went to bed? And then you let them tell the story. And then if you have to go back after that, you can ask the unanswered questions. The child may have avoided the difficult thing. They may tell you the story, and there's big gaps in the story because you know something happened and you know kind of when it happened, but the child leaves it out. Go back very carefully and say, you know what, thank you for telling me. I appreciate that. But mom said that Uncle Bob's friend was in the bathroom with you. What happened there? Right? And then the child might tell you. So you may have to get more pointed after you allow them to just speak, evaluate what they're telling you, and then move on. All right? So that's it. And the other thing that we want to keep in mind with kids, and I'm going to turn this, stop sharing here and go back to just me and you here. All right, so when we keep in mind the whole idea of investigating child crime, it is very difficult. When we deal with adults, we know adults hurt each other, they kill each other, they do brutal things to each other. We're kind of used to that in life. Even the most horrific things we can deal with, most of us. When a child is victimized, maybe a child is sexually assaulted, burned, cut, kicked, beat, killed, buried in a shallow grave, thrown in the garbage, whatever these horrible, horrible things that happen, they can be psychologically devastating to us, the law enforcement officers, right? Because we're not used to that. In my family, nobody beat, kicked, raped, cut, killed children. It just didn't happen. When I became a law enforcement officer, I had to deal with that stuff. And that was really hard for me initially because I was good with the adults. I could deal with them doing bad stuff to each other. But the kids are so innocent, and I had little children at the time. So it was even more difficult. So I'm going to suggest to you that you prepare yourself mentally for how you're going to deal with dealing with these little children who are victimized, right? They deserve you to do the right thing every single time. And keep this last thought in mind for this. When dealing with juveniles, interviewing them, helping them with crimes that have happened to them, wherever, you might be the only person of authority that ever interacts with them in a positive way. You may be the only role model in their life that's a good and decent person. So don't take this stuff lightly. Working with juveniles in any capacity is extremely important. They are the next generation of Americans, of our country, of our neighborhood and our community. So if you're assigned to do juvenile work, or you end up doing juvenile work, take it serious, be proud of it, and do your best, because it is extremely important. All right, everybody, remember, what do we say here all the time? Be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. We will see you down the road.